The last thing I remember is clinking champagne glasses with my fiancé in our Vegas hotel suite, the Bellagio, 23rd floor. Floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the strip, neon lights painting the night sky in electric colors that made the whole city look like it was on fire. Michael raised his glass, those blue eyes locked on mine with an intensity that made my heart skip. "To our future," he said, his voice warm and certain. I smiled back, still getting used to the weight of the engagement ring on my finger. We'd gotten engaged 3 weeks ago in Portland, and this trip was supposed to be our celebration before the chaos of wedding planning consumed us. "To us," I whispered, bringing the glass to my lips. The champagne tasted slightly bitter, sharper than I expected, but I figured the hotel had given us a cheap bottle despite the luxury suite. I took another sip, laughing at something Michael said about the Elvis impersonator we'd seen earlier. Then the room started tilting. Michael's face blurred at the edges. I tried to speak, but my tongue felt thick and useless. The last thing I saw was his expression changing, that warm smile fading into something else, something I couldn't quite identify, before everything went black. I woke up 16 hours later in Sunrise Hospital and Medical Center, with fluorescent lights burning into my retinas and the steady beep of monitors somewhere to my left. My head felt like it had been split open with an axe. An IV drip fed into my arm, the tube snaking down to a bag of clear fluid. I tried to sit up and immediately regretted it as nausea rolled through me. A nurse appeared at my bedside almost instantly, her face creasing with concern. "Welcome back, sweetie. You gave us quite a scare." Her voice was gentle, practiced, the kind of tone you use with someone who's been through trauma. "Where's Michael?" I managed to croak out, my throat raw and dry. The nurse's smile faltered for just a fraction of a second. "The gentleman who brought you in left after the doctor stabilized you. He said he had an emergency." Something cold and sharp settled in my stomach, a feeling I couldn't quite name, but that made my hands start shaking. What happened to me? The nurse busied herself checking my vitals, not quite meeting my eyes. "Severe dehydration and what appears to be a reaction to something. We ran a tox screen. The results should be back soon." I reached for my phone on the bedside table with trembling fingers. Dead. My purse sat on the plastic hospital bag on the chair. I fumbled through it, my movements clumsy and uncoordinated. My wallet was there, but when I opened it, my credit cards were gone. The emergency cash I always kept, $300, folded in the hidden pocket, gone. And my engagement ring, the simple solitaire diamond that Michael had presented on one knee during a rainy hike in the Columbia River Gorge, was no longer on my finger. I stared at my bare hand, at the slight indentation where the ring had been, and felt something crack open inside me. The nurse watched my face crumble with an expression of pity that made me want to scream. "Honey, do you want me to call someone?" But who would I call? My fiancé had vanished, and I was 2,000 miles from home, in a city I barely knew. The police detective arrived 3 hours later, a woman in her 40s, with tired eyes and a notepad that looked like it had survived several crime scenes. Detective Sarah Moreno introduced herself with a firm handshake and sat in the chair beside my hospital bed with the weary posture of someone who'd seen too much human ugliness. "Miss Harper, I need to ask you some questions about the man who brought you to the hospital." Her partner, a younger officer named Chen, stood by the door with his arms crossed. "Michael Torres, my fiancé," I said, and even saying his name felt wrong now, like the word didn't fit in my mouth anymore. "Why? Where is he?" Detective Moreno exchanged a look with Chen that made my stomach drop. "Miss Harper, can you tell me how you met Michael?" The question seemed odd, irrelevant, but I told her anyway. about the coffee shop in Portland 2 years ago, how I'd been struggling with the corrupted presentation file and cursing under my breath when this handsome stranger offered to help, how he turned out to be a software engineer, how he'd fixed my problem in 20 minutes and bought me a latte, how we'd exchanged numbers and within 3 months were inseparable. He was everything I'd been looking for, I told her. Attentive without being clingy, successful without being arrogant, funny and kind and genuinely interested in my work as a marketing coordinator. He remembered small details like how I hated roses but loved sunflowers, how my mother's birthday was in June, how I took my coffee with oat milk and 2 sugars. My friends adored him. My best friend Jessica said he was a keeper, that I shouldn't let this one go. There were small things that should have been red flags, I admitted. He was vague about his family, always changing the subject when I asked. He didn't have social media, claiming he was paranoid about privacy as a tech guy. He always paid cash, said he didn't trust credit card companies tracking everything. But I was in love, and love had made me blind. Detective Moreno listened to all of this without interrupting, just taking notes in that worn notepad. When I finished, she pulled out her laptop and turned it toward me. "Miss Harper, I need you to watch something. It's surveillance footage from the Bellagio." I watched the video, the hotel lobby, the time-stamped reading 1:47 a.m. I watched as the figure appeared in the frame, and my breath caught in my throat. It was Michael, but he was wearing a tuxedo I'd never seen before, perfectly tailored, nothing like the casual clothes he'd been wearing when I last saw him. He wasn't alone. A woman, blonde and petite, in a white dress that wasn't quite a wedding gown but was clearly bridal, was laughing at something he said, her hand tucked into the crook of his arm. They walked towards the exit together, Michael's other arm sliding around his waist, in a gesture so familiar that it made me want to vomit. "That was taken 7 hours after you were admitted to the hospital," Detective Moreno said quietly, her voice careful and measured. I couldn't speak. I couldn't process what I was seeing. "There's more," she said, and clicked to another video. This one was from a wedding chapel, the neon sign visible in the frame, reading Little Church of the West. Michael stood at a small altar with fake flowers and a red carpet that had seen better days. The blonde woman stood beside him in that white dress. An Elvis impersonator officiated, his rhinestone jumpsuit catching the fluorescent light. The time-stamped read 2:14 a.m. "He got married," I whispered, the words feeling surreal as they left my mouth. "While you were unconscious in the emergency room, yes," Detective Moreno confirmed. She closed the laptop and pulled out a file folder, extracting a photograph and sliding it across the hospital tray table. "Is this him?" It was Michael, unmistakably, but the name printed underneath read David Allen Brennan, with the date of birth that made him 2 years older than he told me. The man you know as Michael Torres doesn't exist, at least not the version you know. His real name is David Brennan. He's a professional romance scammer. We've been tracking him for 3 years across 5 states. The room tilted again, but this time I wasn't drugged. This was just the world rearranging itself into a shape I didn't recognize. Detective Moreno continued talking, her words washing over me like cold water. The talk screen from my blood work had come back. Rohypnol, commonly known as a roofie, mixed with a sedative called Ambien. The combination had kept me unconscious for 14 hours. While I was incapacitated, David Brennan had accessed my bank accounts, my credit cards, and my investment portfolio. The total theft was $47,300, my emergency savings. The money I'd been setting aside for a house down payment, my grandmother's inheritance that she had left me when she died 3 years ago. Money I'd been too sentimental to touch because it represented her love and faith in me. All of it. Gone. The woman he married last night is likely another victim. His pattern is to cultivate relationships with multiple women simultaneously. He proposes, takes them to Vegas under the pretense of a romantic getaway, drugs them, and marries the one with the most accessible assets. The others wake up in hospitals or hotels, confused and robbed. I stared at her, my mind trying to catch up with what she was saying. Why marriage? My voice came out as a whisper. In Nevada, marriage gives him legal claims to certain joint assets. It's also easier to access spousal bank accounts and credit in some states. Plus, if the victim reports him, he can claim it was a misunderstanding between husband and wife, that she's just bitter about a divorce. Detective Chen pulled up a slideshow on another laptop, and suddenly I was looking at 4 women's faces. Christina Valdez from San Diego, who'd lost $62,000, Molly Brennan from Seattle, and yes, he'd used her last name as his fake identity, she'd lost $38,000. Jennifer Cho from Denver, $51,000 gone. Sarah Matthews from Phoenix, $44,000 stolen. Their faces look like mine. Intelligent women with good jobs and kind eyes. Women who trusted someone they thought loved them. Each woman met him at a coffee shop, Detective Marino said. Each one thought he was a software consultant. Each one was proposed to within 18 months. Each one was drugged in Vegas. She looked at me with something that might have been sympathy or might have been anger at the world that created men like David Brennan. Miss Harper, you're not stupid. You're a victim of a sophisticated operation run by someone with no conscience. But I felt stupid. I felt like the biggest fool in the world. 2 days later, I met with FBI Special Agent Marcus Webb in a gray conference room that smelt like burnt coffee and institutional cleaning products. The case had been elevated to federal jurisdiction because David Brennan crossed state lines and committed wire fraud. Agent Webb was in his 50s with silver hair and the kind of face that had probably been handsome once but was now just weary. "We need your help to catch him," Webb said without preamble, sliding a legal pad across the table toward me. "He's good at disappearing, but he always resurfaces. New city, new identity, new victims." I spent a week compiling everything I had. Every email, every text message, every photo, every detail about where he said he was from, who he claimed to know, where he supposedly worked. I went through 2 years of my life with a forensic eye, looking for clues I'd missed, patterns I'd been too in love to see. The FBI brought me to Nevada to meet the woman David had married. Lauren Mitchell was 29, a dental hygienist with kind eyes that were red from crying, and a nervous smile that kept faltering. We met at a Starbucks in Henderson, both of us treating the meeting like we were approaching a bomb that might explode. "I'm so sorry," she said as soon as she sat down, the words tumbling out before I could even say hello. "I didn't know," I replied, because what else could I say? "I should have. There were signs." She twisted the wedding ring on her finger, the one David had given her, the one that represented a marriage that had been dissolved 3 days ago. "He proposed to me 2 months ago. We were planning a wedding for next spring. Then he said we should elope in Vegas, be spontaneous, have an adventure." I listened as she told me her version of that night. How excited she'd been, how romantic it had seemed, how she'd felt like the luckiest woman in the world. "Did he drug you?" I asked, and she shook her head. "No, I was awake the whole time, happy, excited." Her voice cracked. "He told me you were his ex, that you'd been harassing him, threatening him, that he'd come to Vegas to get away from you and have a fresh start with me. So I'd been the excuse, the villain in the story he'd told her to make himself seem like a victim who needed rescuing. He made me believe I was saving him from a crazy ex-girlfriend, Lawrence said, covering her face with her hands. God, I'm so stupid. You're not stupid, I said firmly, reaching across the table to touch her arm. You're another victim. We both are. We cried together in that Starbucks, two women who'd loved the same man who'd never existed, who'd given our hearts to a ghost. Lauren's bank account had been drained of $23,000. Her credit cards were maxed out. Her apartment had been stripped of anything valuable, including jewelry that had belonged to her grandmother. The pattern was perfect, elegant in its cruelty, devastating in its execution. The FBI tracked David through a series of burner phones and fake credit cards, following a trail that led them to Austin, Texas. He was using a new identity now, Marcus Delgado, claiming to be a financial consultant. Agent Webb showed me surveillance photos of David, Marcus now, at a wine bar with a brunette woman who looked educated and successful, another potential victim in his crosshairs. We're going to arrest him, Webb said, but we need more evidence. We want to catch him in the act. I didn't even hesitate. Use me. Let me contact him. Draw him out. Webb looked skeptical, his weathered face creasing with concern. Miss Harper, it's dangerous. This man drugged you, robbed you, destroyed your life. Exactly, I said, meeting his eyes. He already destroyed my life. Let me help destroy his. We created a fake social media profile. Emma Richardson, 32 years old, Portland-based graphic designer, visiting Austin for work. I sent David a message through a dating app he was active on under his new identity, keeping my tone light and friendly, mentioning that a mutual friend had suggested he might show me around town. He took the bait within hours. Within 2 days, we'd arranged to meet for dinner at True Luxe Seafood Steak and Crab House downtown. I walked into that restaurant wearing a wire, my heart pounding so hard I was sure everyone could hear it. FBI agents sat at 3 different tables pretending to be normal diners enjoying their meals. David was already seated when I arrived, and he stood as I approached with that same charming smile I'd fallen in love with, that smile that I now knew was a mask covering something empty and predatory. Emma, you're even more beautiful in person, he said, and I wanted to vomit, but I smiled instead. We sat, we ordered drinks, we made small talk about Austin and Portland and the weather. He was smooth, every word calibrated to make me feel special and seen and valued. Everything he said was a carefully crafted lie designed to make me lower my defenses. So Marcus, I said, leaning forward slightly, tell me about yourself. Where are you from originally? San Diego, he said, without hesitation, the lie rolling off his tongue as easy as breathing. Interesting. I said it and watched his smile freeze as I continued, because the man I was engaged to said he was from San Francisco. His hand tightened around his wine glass. And the woman you married in Vegas, she thought you were from Seattle. He started to stand, but I kept talking. Sit down, David. FBI agents closed in from 3 directions, moving with practiced efficiency. Agent Webb appeared at the table, his badge visible, his voice carrying the weight of federal authority. David Allen Brennan, you're under arrest for wire fraud, identity theft, and intrastate theft. I watched his face as they read him his rights and snapped handcuffs around his wrists. There was no emotion, no panic, no fear, just emptiness, like looking into a void where a human soul should have been. As they led him toward the exit, he looked back at me one last time. You were my favorite, he said quietly, and the words made my skin crawl because I realized he meant it as a compliment, like I should be honored to have been his preferred victim. David Brennan's trial made national news. Romance scammer arrested after 2-year FBI investigation, the headline screamed. 7 women testified, including me. We sat in that courtroom and told our stories, laying bare our pain and humiliation and loss for judges and juries and journalists to pick apart. The prosecutor presented evidence of theft totaling $310,000 across multiple victims over 5 years. David's defense attorney tried to paint him as a man with mental health issues, who'd made mistakes, who deserved compassion rather than punishment. But the jury saw through it. They saw him for what he was, a predator who'd made a career of destroying women's lives for profit. Guilty on all counts. 15 years in federal prison. I never got my money back. David had spent it all on maintaining his various identities, on other women, on the endless cycle of cons that was his life. But I got something more valuable than money. I got closure, and I got knowledge, and I got proof that I wasn't crazy or stupid or naive. I was just human, and I trusted someone who weaponized that trust. 1 year after that night in Vegas, I sit in a coffee shop in Portland, writing these words. Not the coffee shop where I met David, I can't go back there, but a new one across town where the barista knows my order and the regulars nod hello and nobody knows my story unless I choose to tell it. I'm writing a book about my experience, working title, The Man Who Never Existed. And my therapist says it's healthy, that processing trauma through narrative can be powerful. Jessica still apologizes sometimes for not seeing the red flags, and I tell her what I tell myself, that none of us saw them because David was a professional and his job was to be invisible until it was too late. Lauren and I text occasionally, checking in, sharing articles about romance scams, supporting each other from a distance. She's dating again, cautiously, carefully, running background checks and taking things slow. I'm not ready yet. Maybe someday, but right now, I'm focused on rebuilding myself, on learning to trust my own judgment again, on understanding that what happened to me wasn't a reflection of my worth or intelligence, but rather a reflection of David's complete lack of humanity. I still think about that night in Vegas sometimes, usually late at night when sleep won't come and my mind wanders to dark places. I think about the champagne that tasted wrong, about the moment everything went black, about waking up in a hospital alone with my life stolen. But I also think about what came after, about the strength I discovered in myself, about the women who became my allies, about the FBI agents who fought for justice, about the jury who believed us. I survived a predator who'd made a career of destroying women, and I'm still here. Not broken, though there are cracks I'm still learning to fill. Not silent, which is why I'm writing this book, why I speak at conferences about romance scams, why I answer messages from women who think they might be victims but aren't sure. Just wiser, more careful, more aware that monsters don't always look like monsters, that sometimes they look like the person who brings you coffee and fixes your computer and remembers that you love sunflowers. The man I loved never existed, and I've made peace with that. Michael Torres was a fiction, a character David Brennan created and performed with the skill of a method actor. I mourned that fiction for a while, mourned the future we'd planned, mourned the person I thought I was going to marry. But eventually, I realized I was mourning a ghost, and you can't grieve forever for something that was never real. The woman I became, though, she's real. She's here. She's survived. And she's learned that the most important thing isn't finding someone who makes you feel complete, because you should already be complete on your own. The most important thing is protecting that completeness, guarding it fiercely, refusing to let anyone make you disappear. David Brennan tried to erase me. He drugged me, robbed me, married someone else while I lay unconscious, tried to reduce me to just another victim in his long list of cons. But I'm still here. Still whole, still fighting. And that's the victory he never saw coming.